Okay, in 1996, I decided I wanted to put an ad in the paper for a promotional assistant to help me promote the Max Touch body balancing. A fellow by the name of Kai Spencer called me up. He was visiting his mother. He was a massage therapist in Las Vegas. He said, I've been to 20 chiropractors and nobody can level my shoulders. I said, well, come on over and I'll dial you in and we'll show you what the Max Touch body balance is all about. Well, he came over to my house. I didn't know, but he had been in a bad car accident in Australia, lost the sight in his right eye and the hearing in his right ear. He had a fake eye that he couldn't see out of, but it moved just like the other one. You couldn't even tell. Anyway, when I had him on the table balancing him, he was laying on his good ear. Well, he knew I was talking to him because there was a mirror there and he could see my lips moving. Well, when I got to the nerve connections for the hearing, he got his hearing back in that ear. Well, he was so impressed that he says, I want to learn how to do this so I can add it to my massage therapy practice. And so he came over the next day and I taught him a couple days. It takes 2 days to teach somebody how to do the full body balancing. And he was going to have a booth at a health show. So he talked me into going and sharing a booth with him at this health show. And while we were there, he decided he wanted to go get some shiatsu done, some chair massage. And so I was on the phone calling home to my kids to see if they were all right, make sure they were all right and everything. Well, I got off the phone just as his name was Kai Spencer, finished his shiatsu treatment. And I said, let me muscle test you, Kai. And so immediately I muscle tested him. And he was out in his neck, his hips were out. So I told him, I said, look, once you're put into balance, you don't need any of this other stuff because it's going to interfere, it's going to maybe knock you out of balance. So it made a believer out of him. I put him back into balance. And we went ahead to share another booth at the Las Vegas Whole Life Expo. And from then on, I started lecturing at the Whole Life Expos. The first lecture I had was in Pasadena, which is where Dr. Thie had his practice until he moved to Thousand Oaks. Well, an older couple in their 60s, maybe 70s, came to my lecture, and then after the lecture they came down on the floor to be balanced at my booth. I explained to them how I learned it from Merle Cole, who was head of the Touch for Health research team. He learned it from Dr. Thie. Dr. Thie learned it from Dr. Goodhart, who is father of kinesiology. And after I balanced her and her husband, she gave me the best compliment I've ever gotten in my life. She says, you're the perfect example of the student surpassing the teacher. She says, you're much better than Dr. Thie, who had been head of the kinesiology department at Pepperdine University for over 6 years. And so then I went ahead and lectured at the Los Angeles Whole Life Expo. There I met a 30-year holistic doctor who was so impressed with my work that she invited me to her clinic in Cathedral City, which is a suburb of Palm Desert, or not Palm Desert, but can't even think of it.
Palm Springs.
Palm Springs, yes. So anyway, she had a schedule for me to balance her favorite clientele. Every half hour she had somebody set up for me. I was late getting there, so when I got there, there was a lady that I was supposed to balance first, and then there was another couple, young, good-looking, well-built gentleman and lady. Well, as I was balancing the first client, the doctor, he was a doctor, he didn't tell me he was a doctor until afterwards, but he was sitting in the chair over next to his friend that he came with. And when I got to the point where I was deprogramming negative trauma from past ancestors, this guy flopped his head over on this lady's shoulder and started going into these like seizure type gestures. And so I came around the table and was walking over towards him to see if I could figure out what his problem was. I thought he was just goofing off at first. So anyway, as I'm approaching him, he projects vomit right at me. And then he goes into this grand mal epileptic seizure type event. And so these ladies say, well, help him, do something to help him. So I calmly walked over and touched him and gave him an instant balance, which you can do by touching the end of your governing energy meridian with your left hand and just touching the person with your right hand, which gives them a shot of energy and gives them an instant balance, which lasts for 2 or 3 hours. In other words, all the muscles and organs test strong. Well, as soon as I touched him, he came out of his episode. Well, I had a shirt on like this and a tank top underneath, and he had vomited all over his shirt, so I gave him my shirt to wear in the meantime. So anyway, I went ahead and balanced the lady, and then I balanced the other lady that came with him, and I told him that I couldn't balance him for a couple, 3 hours because I'd given him an instant balance, and all these muscles and organs were going to test strong. And I went ahead and demonstrated, showed him. I still didn't know he was a doctor, chiropractic doctor. And so anyway, he comes back a couple, 3 hours later, and I go ahead and test him. Now everything's testing weak again, like normal. And so I go ahead and balance him, and then he asked me, is there any way we can find out what caused this episode? And I said, sure. Your innate intelligence knows everything that's gone on. We can communicate with it through muscle testing and find out exactly what happened. Well, this other lady says, well, this happened right when you were deprogramming negative trauma from past ancestors on this first lady. And this guy got white as a sheet. He said, that's it. He said, I had horrible ancestry. He said, my ancestors were the most horrible people you could imagine. And so then we tested also to see if he had attached spirits. And he had attached spirits at the same time. And this is what caused the episode. And once we put him into balance, of course, he was all right. Well, then he tells me he's a chiropractic doctor, and he thought this is the greatest thing he'd ever seen, and he wanted to learn how to do it. I ended up teaching Alona in her office. She had a pretty good-sized office. And I taught several chiropractors and massage therapists and Alona. And so anyway, that's one of the many experiences I've had. Gone to Venice Beach I was there for 12 years or so. I had some pretty incredible healings there. I had an 80-year-old man, his son pushed him up in a wheelchair. This guy hadn't walked for over a year. Right knee was locked up, he couldn't straighten his leg out. We lifted him out of his wheelchair onto the table. After I balanced him, this man got off the table on this side, walked around the table. Every once in a while he had to grab the table for balance because he hadn't walked for over a year. Walked all the way up to the end of the table. Instead of turning around the inside way so he could keep a hold of the table, he turns around the outside way, walks back to the end of the table. He gets to the end of the table, he tells his son, get in the wheelchair, I'm going to push you now. 80 years old, hadn't walked for over a year. So anyway, when he left, he walked away pushing his wheelchair. His son wasn't in it, of course. He was standing behind him to catch him because he didn't know if he was going to fall or what. So anyway, this man comes back 2 weeks later. I do the maintenance on him, maintenance sheet, 5 minutes a week. After I did the maintenance on him, this time he walked away with no wheelchair in front of me, just like you or I would walk down the street. Another lady, she was 26 years old. She was born deaf, never heard a thing in her life. After I balanced her, corrected all the nerve connections and everything, she got her hearing. First thing she heard was a blues band playing at the Venice Bistro. At the time they were redoing the whole Venice Beach boardwalk, and I was set up all the way down almost to Santa Monica. And the first thing she heard in her life was a blues band playing at the Venice Bistro, tears rolling out of her eyes. By the time she left, her speech was almost normal. She was correcting herself that quickly. Another lady, probably in her 60s, 70s, came up and said, I've been watching you balance people. She says, I want to be balanced in the worst way. But she says, I just had brain surgery. I have pain from the top of my head to my neck, all the way across the back of my head. You can't touch me anywhere. I have excruciating pain. Well, I touch the scalp when I do the nerve connections and the sensor connections on the sensor cortex and the motorism cortex. Well, necessity is the mother of invention, so I go, well, look, I can't touch her. She's had excruciating pain. So what I did was I held my fingers 1/4 of an inch from her scalp, not touching, but the energy corrected the nerve connections anyway. When I got finished balancing her, she had no pain. She could touch her head anywhere without any pain. She said, this was on a Sunday. She said, I'm calling my brain surgeon and canceling my appointment. She had an appointment for the next day on Monday. She had pain in her back and hips. That all went away. And so there was another good example. Another fellow was hit on his bicycle, a car hit him. He could only move his arm up to about his navel area. He'd been through many months of physical therapy. After I balanced him, he walked away touching his forehead. Another lady at a health show in San Diego. This lady knew about Touch for Health. She'd been using the manual for years. She brought her mother. Her mother was sitting over in a chair, and I balanced her daughter, and so then she says, "Well, can you help my mom?" I said, "Sure." She didn't even get out of the chair. She didn't get on the table or anything. I just went over to the chair, maximized her governing energy meridian, did her lymphatic valve, the nerve connections. And I went back over to the table. She's over there with a big smile on her face. She says, "What did you do?" I said, "I gave you a balance." She says, "I haven't been able to touch my head like this for years." And she was going like this, you know. It's because she had some problem. I didn't even know what it was. Anyway, she's over there really good. So these are just a few of the situations that we've came across in the past years.